Hello and thanks for joining us on Chicago Tonight, Black Voices. I'm Brandis Friedman. Here's what we're looking at.
We're trying to get information.
Local officials and community leaders are preparing for the arrival of federal troops in Chicago. How a phase out of the city's minimum wage for tipped workers is impacting local businesses and employees. How do you think going to an HBCU is different from going to a predominantly white school?
I don't know. I really think it's all about what you make it.
And a new documentary dives into the history, changes, and misconceptions of historically black colleges and universities. First off tonight, a strike team of federal immigration agents accompanied by National Guard troops or other armed military personnel could hit Chicago's streets in just 48 hours. That's according to Governor J.B. Pritzker. It comes as President Donald Trump sent confusing messages about whether he would send the National Guard to Chicago over the governor's objections.
We're making a determination now. Do we go to Chicago or do we go to a place like New Orleans, where we have a great governor, Jeff Landry, who wants us to come in and straighten out a very nice section of this country that's become quite tough, quite bad.
Now, despite those comments, Governor J.B. Pritzker said the arrival of hundreds of federal agents is imminent.
What we're hearing is that they'll be assembled, ready to go on Friday, and that they would begin actions on Saturday.
All right, our Heather Sharon joins us now with more. Heather, do we know what these federal agents will be asked to do in Chicago?
We believe that they will be charged with carrying out immigration enforcement operations, but we don't know where, when, or sort of what the scope of those operations will be. We also don't know whether they will be accompanied by any other federal military personnel, because as you heard, Governor J.B. Pritzker, weeks into this sort of debate about what the president is doing, still is flying blind with very little information. And he has acknowledged that that has created a lot of tension in Chicago.
So the governor said yesterday that he believes the Trump administration plans to send Texas National Guard troops to Chicago. Do we have any more details on that?
We don't. Texas Governor Greg Abbott told me and other reporters that that is incorrect, that there is no plan to federalize the Texas National Guard and send it to Illinois. However, today, Governor J.B. Pritzker said he had his sources, he believed them to be credible, and that Governor Abbott has not been a good friend or a straight shooter with Illinois. You'll remember he sent 50,000 migrants from the southern border to Chicago, ripping apart the city's social safety net and exacerbating tensions between Black and Latino Chicagoans.
Okay, so one day the president says he's sending in the National Guard. The next day he says he's considering his options, as we heard him say. What does the governor make of these confusing messages coming from the president?
He sort of just threw up his hands and said, look, it's clear that the president wants Governor Pritzker to ask him to send in the National Guard, which would give him the legal authority to do so. Pritzker says he will refuse. I think there's also a little bit of a confusion over exactly what we're talking about here. The president has the right to send federal immigration agents to Chicago. He has done it before. He did it in January. The question is whether those immigration raids will be so much larger than the ones that we saw here in the city in January, whether they will touch off unrest, and whether that will allow the president the authority or the need to call out the National Guard. That's the playbook he followed in Los Angeles. Will he do it in Chicago? We'll have to wait and see.
Certainly inciting fear in the immigration community. In the meantime, did the governor have any advice for Chicagoans as they brace for the arrival of these agents?
He said to get your iPhones ready and to be ready to record immigration agents as they operate in Chicago, so that he said everybody can see what they're doing on Chicago's streets. The city has also ramped up efforts to educate people about their rights and what they should do when confronted with immigration agents, and whether they have to allow them into their home only if they have a signed judicial warrant, as a reminder.
All right, and Android phones, if you should carry those. Heather Sharon staying on top of it for us. Thank you.
Thanks, Brandis.
And you can read Heather's full story on our website. It's all at WTTW.com/news. Now to some more of today's top stories. As the Trump and Pritzker administrations continue to trade barbs over that troop deployment, Chicago police say the city's decline in crime continued throughout the month of August. New data shows homicides are down 24% compared to August 2024, the lowest monthly total for any August since the 48 homicides that happened in August 2014. NCPD says shooting incidents are down 24% comparing August of last year to this year. Year to date, there have been 278 homicides, but that's down 31% from last year and the lowest since 2014. The families of two teens shot by a former Chicago Park District lifeguard are suing him and the Park District. The lawsuit says 14-year-old Jeremy Hurt, pictured here, is now a quadriplegic, while 15-year-old Marjay Dotson was killed in the shooting. Charles Lito is accused of shooting the two boys in Douglas Park in Chicago's North Lawndale community. Police say Lito claims he was attacked and acting in self-defense. The lawsuit filed today claims the boys were unarmed and never a threat to Lito. It also claims Lito has a violent past.
Why was someone with a violent background who just shot and killed dogs a few months earlier, a shooting that required a SWAT team response that had to search his apartment to find him, why was this man not arrested?
Lito remains in custody at Cook County Jail pending trial. The Chicago Stars football club is moving to the north suburbs next season. The team is set to play at Northwestern University's Martin Stadium along the lakefront. The Stars announced the move today ahead of Sunday's game, which will be played at the Evanston venue. The 12,000-seat stadium was built as the interim home for Northwestern's football team until the new Ryan Field construction is completed. The team will wrap their lease at SeatGeek Stadium in Bridgeview at the end of this year. Up next, what a pay bump for Chicago's service workers means for local businesses.
Chicago Tonight, Black Voices, is made possible in part by the support of these donors.
Chicago's tipped workers may have noticed a little more in their paycheck this summer. It's part of the One Fair Wage ordinance that took effect last year. The ordinance phases out the tipped minimum wage in 5 years so that it matches the citywide minimum wage by July 2028. Last year, wages went up to $11.02. This year, it increased again to $12.62 an hour. While Mayor Johnson and advocates say the move helps the city's lowest paid workers, critics worry about the higher labor costs facing restaurants. Joining us to discuss the move are Nataki Rhodes, the national organizer with One Fair Wage, and Scott Weiner, board chairman for the Illinois Restaurant Association. Thanks to you both for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having us, Mayor.
Nataki, starting with you first. This is the second year of the phase out of this minimum wage, or the phase in, I should say, the minimum wage increase for tipped workers. Why do you think this is needed?
Because the impact of workers putting more money in their pockets, that helps the economy, that has helped Chicago with the economy, to boost the economy and to put more money into workers' pockets. That means that workers can be able to put food on their tables and be able to do the things that they need to do.
What's been the response from workers so far who've been earning this tipped wage?
It's been overwhelmingly great. Like, workers are great, glad that they're receiving a tip wage increase. And it's really not about getting a tip, it's really about the wage increase. And so workers are always happy and excited. I talked to thousands of workers this past Labor Day weekend, and is very happy that they see a wage increase in their paychecks.
Scott Weiner, what's been the impact on restaurants so far?
Well, I'm seeing something different. We've been hosting town halls all over the city, and from what we've been hearing from workers and from what we've experienced in our own restaurants is that workers are actually losing hours. Since this last year, 5,200 jobs have been lost alone in the Chicago service industry. So while the intention's good, we want to get bigger paychecks to people, the unintended consequences is that our servers are losing their jobs, our back of the house employees, they're not getting wage increases, and that restaurants are closing their doors. Currently, over 100 restaurants closed their doors from last year, and we just started the next phase in. So the expectation is many more restaurants will close. And while everybody wants to see people make more money, unfortunately, the consumer is unable currently to handle higher price increases. So they're dining out less, which is just exasperating this issue.
Are restaurants having to pass that additional cost on to their consumer, to their customer?
Ideally, in a great economy, you could. But right now, what we're seeing, especially in the neighborhoods, 79th Street, 53rd Street, Clark, Lincoln, is that these neighborhood spots, they just don't have anything left to pass on to the consumer that's already cash strapped. So what ends up happening here is that restaurants are cutting hours, they're cutting shifts, and ultimately there's nothing left to pass on. And as a restaurateur, and just speaking in general for this industry right now, the margins are so tight as it is. If you think about it, 1 to 3% profit, if you do $1 million in sales, you might be taking 10 to 10,000, maybe 30,000 to the bottom line. So that is if you're doing that. So right now, unfortunately, we're seeing the opposite. We're seeing restaurants just unable to do this, which means that we're turning to technology, QR codes for ordering. And while some servers may be making more per hour, they're actually making less overall. And that's what the Department of Labor shows us.
How are they making less overall?
Because they're losing their hours. Losing hours, losing jobs.
Yeah, so restaurants in Chicago, it was over 859 new restaurants that applied for their restaurant to open their license. Every day, Chicago has new restaurants opening up. They are making money. The tourists and the concerts and everything are making money, and they are bringing money into Chicago. Chicago restaurants are not closing due to just the wage increase that just took place this year. That's not why they're closing. They're closing due to mismanagement of their profits. And on 79th and King Drive, where I stay at, Josephine's Restaurants, Dan's Soul Food, they have to raise their prices. They are already raising their, not prices, but their wages due to they can't get anyone to come in and work for low wages. And the restaurant industry has always been a part-time industry. I'm a former tip worker myself. I worked here all my life. This is the only place I worked in Chicago, around Chicago, outside of Chicago. And so to say that Chicago business is gonna hurt when the Restaurant Association is over the Taste of Chicago, is over the James Beard Award. They are over a lot of things, and most of the restaurants that he's talking about, the 50-50, so all of them are making money.
Okay, so Scott, you mentioned 100 restaurants having had to close in the last year since this went into effect.
Sure.
Are you hearing from member restaurants that this is a result of the increased minimum wage for tipped workers?
Well, I mean, let's just take 50-50. 50-50 closed the doors, and I'm pretty sure that I didn't mismanage that place over 17 years.
50-50, your restaurant.
My first
restaurant.
Raise increases from just last year?
What I would say, though, is when we start really looking at facts, right, 859 new licenses, business licenses, right? We're talking about quick service, we're talking about concessions, we're talking about a food license in a grocery store. So we're not talking about full service restaurants with servers, ultimately. And that sort of brings me back to One Fair Wage. If you just go to the website right now, on their website, the first thing they lead with is that 50% of restaurant workers are thinking about leaving.
They did leave the restaurant. 73%, it was a great resignation.
73% want to leave because of tips. Now, here's the thing that's interesting.
Because of low wages. Okay, so nobody's leaving because of tips.
Nataki, I want to jump in here.
That's been on their website now for 2 years. Okay. So if that were to be the case, we'd have no restaurant industry. To go a step further, of the facts, the data set that One Fair Wage presented to City Council, to the mayor, 23 out of 27 of those facts were actually internal studies cited that One Fair Wage did themselves to actually call facts.
So I want to bring in some facts that we got from the Bureau of Labor Statistics then. Servers in Illinois make an average wage of $16.68 per hour and an average annual salary of $34,700. Scott, first of all, what do you make of those numbers, and what do you say to those who are concerned that workers aren't making enough to support themselves?
Well, I mean, to that point, right, that is higher than the minimum wage in Chicago, and those numbers do not cite the fact that in Chicago, most servers are making between $28 and 50 cents per hour. And as it is, the people that really need to get the wage increases the most are in the back of the house. And what restaurants provide, when we start talking about our back of the house employees, we're the anchors of these communities. When we really start falling into our Hispanic employees, the ones that are not English speaking, those people don't have the opportunity to be a server where as often where they have the opportunity to earn more in tips. So the $16.62 per hour, at the end of the day, that is more than the minimum wage.
But that's still at a low $34,000 is living on poverty income, and so to be in Chicago,
how does that salary, or how does this wage model, right, of a sub minimum wage plus tips wage model, how does that impact Black and Latino workers in particular?
And so how does it impact? Well, first of all, to have the wage increase, the impact of having a wage increase means that families can take care of themselves. That means that families can probably not go to Italy or to France, but they can get the things that they need, at what they need and what they would like to have. Maybe get some extra shoes for their children, take care of their rent. I mean, I am a victim. I myself was a victim of evictions, and I had to work 2 and 3 jobs just to maintain because of a low wage.
So we've got 30 seconds left, Scott.
I guess where I come back to is ultimately this didn't work in others. It didn't work in DC. It didn't work anywhere else. The state of Illinois saw what's happened in Chicago.
Well, and just to your point, because we've got to wrap it up, but DC did make a similar wage attempt to phase out their tip credit and increase the sub-minimum wage. They ended up partially repealing part of that because the claim was that restaurants closed due to higher expenses there. But viewers are going to have to go to our website if they want to learn more about that, because we're going to have to put a pause on this conversation. Nataki Rhodes and Scott Weiner, thanks to you both for joining us.
Appreciate it.
Thank you for having us.
Up next, a new documentary explores the state of historically Black colleges and universities. Our Joanna Hernandez joins us next.
They've been around for over 188 years. HBCUs, or historically Black colleges and universities, were founded out of necessity when predominantly white institutions, or PWIs, barred Black students from attending. Since then, the institutions have experienced significant changes and challenges, to say the least. A new documentary explores the current state of these institutions by profiling 5 students. It's called Opportunity, Access, and Uplift, the Evolving Legacy of HBCUs. Joining us now with more is a familiar face, the one and only
surprise,
Brandis Freeman, host and producer of this new documentary. I have you in the hot seat now.
You do.
How does it
weird.
feel?
I don't like it, actually.
So let's talk about your documentary.
Yeah.
You and a team of co-producers worked on this project for 2 years, long time. Yep. What was the passion behind, making this documentary?
Honestly, so my co-producer, David Duncan, he came to me with the idea. He had found some research and he had gotten interested in it. And I got really excited about it, once we got the idea. And I'm like, yes, we should do a documentary about HBCUs. And, the station has been very generous to allow me to do this as a side passion project. So it is not a WTTW production. But, I attended an HBCU. My parents, who grew up in the Jim Crow South, my aunts and uncles, they all attended HBCUs. So it was very familiar to me, but I knew that sort of the mainstream higher ed conversation didn't give HBCUs quite as much love. It's not like they were unheard of, but people tend to have only heard of the same handful: Howard, Morehouse, Spelman. So when I tell people that I went to college in New Orleans, they're always like, did you go to Tulane? Well, if I went to Tulane, I would have said I went to Tulane.
Tulane.
So then I have to follow up with, I went to Dillard University. It's an HBCU. Oh, what's that? And it's a whole other conversation. So we're putting that conversation into this documentary.
And tell me about the students, a little bit about the students that you follow.
Yeah, so we tried to get as diverse a cast of students as we can, considering that we are going to especially black schools. But within especially black schools, you'll see that, you'll learn in the documentary that a quarter of the student enrollment across HBCUs is non-black, right? So we talked to a DACA student in Delaware. We talked to a Latino student in New Orleans, and we talked to many students who maybe they hadn't heard of HBCUs, being that they are first generation to attend college, or their family are immigrants. And so we got a diversity of students, in addition to a Chicago high schooler who
deciding
in the film,
what to do.
He's trying to figure it out, and we go through his process with him and his family a little bit, and then at the end is the surprise when you get to find out where he went.
The documentary offers an interesting perspective on the impact of COVID-19 on communities of color. What was important? Why was it important to address, and what connection did it bring to students at HBCU schools?
So, when interviewing Dr. Michael Lomax, he is now the president of UNCF, United Negro College Fund formerly, and was also the president of Dillard University when I was a student in college there. He made the point that, when America gets a cold, Black America gets the flu. And I think he was making the point that it is something similar with HBCUs, right? If schools, or if the country is struggling with something, it's going to be a little bit worse for Black America or Black students. And so I think the same might be argued now as universities are sort of in the hot seat and they're experiencing losing funding. Those funding cuts hurt Black schools just that much more because their funding is already a little bit smaller than what a typical PWI or a comparable PWI might be able to use.
And your doc also touches on the comparison between HBCUs and PWIs, which you mentioned they're predominantly white institutions. Let's take a listen.
I didn't really know that much about HBCUs because I lived in more of a predominant white areas, but never the HBCU conversation was ever spoken to me because, most HBCUs are not looked upon the same way as the PWIs are.
What was it like for you to interview these students?
Well, I'll be honest. So the Delaware State students, my partner Mario Tharp, one of our co-producers, he actually went to Delaware State because I couldn't do it all, but I went to Dillard University. And so it was a lot of fun to talk to them about their experience. I know why I went to an HBCU. I have a sense of why my family members and my friends went to an HBCU, but today is different, right? They're choosing HBCUs in a different century. And so I was really curious about why they chose an HBCU and what their experience was like. Was it much different from mine? Were there reasons much different from mine? And I think everybody's, obviously, you've got your own reasons for choosing where you go to school, but some of us are gonna have some things in common. And so
what did it feel like to going back there?
Oh, so much fun. I hadn't been back to campus very much until I went back for the shoot at Dillard. And so it was a lot of fun. It was also very interesting to see some of the changes that had happened on campus over the years. And then some of the parts that were still there that, that were just like when I was there years ago.
Years ago? Let's not age ourselves.
We're not gonna tell people right now.
Now, community was a common theme in the doc. Students attended these institutions because they wanted to feel a sense of belonging. But you also get personal and talk about the common trope that it's still prevalent in the Black community today, defining your Blackness. Did you ever feel out of place because of that stigma?
I'm not sure that I felt out of place, but I think, going from, I grew up in Vicksburg, Mississippi, and my high school was very much white and Black, right? And it's Mississippi, so they worked hard to make sure that our classes were 50-50, that, our enrollment was 50% white, 50% Black, or 49-49, and 2% other. And that's what the real world is, right? It is diverse. And so there was a little bit of culture shock arriving on a campus that is pretty much all Black students at the time when I enrolled in the late 90s. And so I never felt out of place, but I did love getting to meet all sorts of Black people, right? Yeah. Black people with varying experiences, because that's what it is, right? We're all going to have different experiences in life, and that is the case for anyone, right? Not just Black people.
Did you feel that same sentiment with the students that you did interview at Dillard, that they had that pride, or they were feeling like, oh, absolutely, this is somewhere where I can thrive?
Yes, absolutely, and that's the case for anyone, not just the Black students that were on campus there.
You know, I know this is a question that we always ask, but you know, what do you hope that people take away from this documentary that you work so hard for?
Yes, thank you. I hope that, you know, for, you know, my fellow HBCU alumni, I hope that they see themselves and that they recognize their own experiences in the film. And for folks who maybe aren't so familiar with it, I hope that they come away with a familiarity and an understanding and an appreciation for these schools, and also a little bit of recognition that they, like, while they have educated so many Black people over the years, they are not just for Black people. They never have been. They were started with Black people in mind, obviously, but not just for Black people. That an HBCU is for anyone.
Well, congrats on putting this documentary together. I'm sure there was so much sweat, blood, and tears. I don't know if I'm saying it right, but well, anyways, you can watch the documentary Sunday at 5 p.m. on WTTW or right now online at WTTW.com/HBCU special. And we're back to wrap things up right after this.
And that's our show for this Wednesday night. Join us tomorrow night at 5:30 and 10. Now, for all of us here at Chicago Tonight Black Voices, I'm Brandis Friedman. Thank you for watching. Stay healthy and safe, and have a good night.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a personal injury law firm that gives back to the community through law and philanthropy.